In the early hours of Monday, March 23, 2026, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, while most of Nigeria slept, a group of terrorists emerged from the Kainji National Park forest in Borgu local government area of Niger State. They placed an improvised explosive device beneath a bridge on Nuku-Woro Road, and they detonated it. The bridge, the only road link connecting the communities of Luma, Babana, and Agwara, was destroyed. On the same night, a commercial vehicle carrying 7 passengers and a driver struck a second IED on the Nuku-Woro Road. All 8 occupants died. The Niger State Police Command spokesperson, SP Wasiu Abiodun, confirmed both incidents the following morning, stating that the bridge attack appeared designed to disrupt ongoing security operations and that clearance operations had been intensified. No arrests were announced. And if that is not enough, barely 48 hours before the bombing, these same terrorists had written a letter to the people of Papiri demanding 150 million naira to prevent an attack. Let that settle. Terrorists in Nigeria are now sending ransom letters to communities before they strike. While Abuja debates 2027 elections and coalition politics, in Borgu, Niger State, the Jihadist front has moved from the northeast to the north-central. And the question this channel is asking today is the one that should be keeping the President of Nigeria awake at night. How did we get here? And does anyone in power actually have a plan to stop it? Most channels will give you the headline. We give you the architecture behind it. If you have never been here before, you just found Nigeria's most analytical political channel. Subscribe, because what comes next in this video is the part they hope you never piece together. What happened? The full sequence. At approximately 2 a.m. on Monday, March 23, 2026, terrorists operating from within the Kainji National Park forest in Borgu local government area, Niger State, used an improvised explosive device to destroy a bridge along Nuku-Woro Road in Borgu local government area, Niger State. The bridge was the sole road connection linking the Luma, Babana, and Agwara communities, and a critical access route to the Babana border market, which holds every Monday and serves as the primary commercial hub for thousands of traders across the area. On the same night, a second IED was planted on the Nuku-Woro Road in the same axis. A commercial vehicle carrying 7 passengers and its driver struck the device. All 8 occupants died. The Niger State Police Command spokesperson, SP Wasiu Abiodun, confirmed both incidents the following morning, stating that the bridge attack appeared designed to disrupt ongoing security operations and that clearance operations had been intensified. No arrests were announced. The ransom letter, the detail nobody is reporting. Leadership newspaper reported that barely 48 hours before the bridge was bombed, the same terrorist group operating from Kainji National Park had written a letter to the people of Papiri community demanding 150 million naira to prevent an imminent deadly attack. The bridge was bombed 48 hours after that threat was issued. This means the attack was not spontaneous. It was planned, announced, and executed on schedule, and the security agencies did not intercept it. Who are these attackers? Security analysts and intelligence assessments have identified multiple jihadist factions operating in the Borgu Kainji corridor. These include JAS, Jamaat Ahlus Sunnah Lidawat wal Jihad, commonly known as Boko Haram, a Sadiku-led faction operating in collaboration with JNIM, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, fighters infiltrating from the Sahel through the Liptako-Gorma tri-border forest corridor spanning Mali, Niger Republic and Burkina Faso before filtering through Benin Republic into the Kainji National Park ecosystem. Ansaru splinter factions and ISWAP-linked cells have also been identified in the area. This is not banditry. This is a multi-group jihadist operation with transnational logistics. Why this is happening now? 3 factors converge to explain the timing and intensity of attacks in Borgu. First, the Kainji National Park has been effectively abandoned as a security priority. A 2024 Klingendel Institute report identified the park as hosting multiple violent extremist organizations who have been present for years without decisive military action to dislodge them. Attacks in the park's surrounding communities surged from 5 recorded in 2022 to 29 in 2023, a near 6-fold increase in a single year. Second, the terrorists are deliberately targeting infrastructure to slow down military response. The bridge bombing on Luma Road is not random. It is a tactical operation designed to impede troop movement and supply lines in an area where the Nigerian army is conducting counter-insurgency operations. Third, the ransom letter to Papiri represents a new phase of territorial control behavior. Communities are being economically extorted before attacks, which is a pattern consistent with jihadist groups establishing permanent sanctuary rather than conducting hit-and-run operations. The Kainji National Park spans Niger and Kwara states and covers over 5,000 square kilometers. Security analysts have warned for over a year that if the corridor is not decisively cleared, it will become a permanent jihadist sanctuary linking Sahel-based terror networks directly to Nigeria's heartland. We will return to what that means for states beyond Niger, including Kwara, Kogi, and ultimately the south. Governor Mohammed Umaru Bago of Niger State visited Borgu twice after major attacks, in November 2025 and January 2026. After the January visit, he reportedly told communities near Kainji National Park to relocate within 2 months with no housing, no support, and no plan. We will return to what that directive reveals about the state's actual security strategy. Institutions with responsibility. At least 5 institutional actors carry direct responsibility for the security situation in Borgu, and each has failed in a distinct way. The Nigerian Army's Operation Hadarin Daji, the primary military operation covering the northwest, has jurisdiction over parts of the Borgu corridor, but Borgu sits at the intersection of the northwest and north-central commands, creating a jurisdictional seam that terrorists have learned to exploit. Coordination between the 2 commands has been persistently inadequate. The National Park Service, specifically the Kainji Lake National Park Management, is constitutionally responsible for the security of the park's 5,382 square kilometers. The park's Conservator General has been criticized by community leaders for failing to flag the severity of the threat. A local leader directly criticized the Conservator General, who hails from Borgu Emirate, for neglecting the park and failing his own people in a security crisis. The Niger State government under Governor Bago has made multiple condolence visits and issued statements, but has not produced a credible security deployment plan. Its most controversial action was directing communities near the park to relocate, which residents interpreted as the government abandoning them rather than protecting them. The Federal Ministry of Defense and the Office of the National Security Advisor hold strategic responsibility for counter-terrorism coordination. No public strategy document has been produced specifically addressing the Borgu Kainji jihadist corridor. The Nigerian police force, whose spokesperson confirmed this specific attack, is structurally under-resourced for counter-insurgency operations and is functioning in a support role in an environment that requires primary military response. The legal and constitutional dimension. Under Section 14, Subsection 2, Subsection B of the 1999 Constitution, the primary purpose of government is the security and welfare of the people. The Borgu communities have been attacked repeatedly with documented jihadist presence, ransom demands, school abductions, market massacres, and now IED bridge bombing, and no constitutional obligation has been met. The legal framework is clear. The political will to enforce it is absent. The Kainji National Park once held animals. It no longer does. A community leader stated plainly, it has no animals living there. It has outlived its usefulness and now harbors criminals. The park, a federal government asset, constitutionally managed by the National Park Service, has been effectively ceded to armed jihadist groups who use it as a base of operations, a logistics corridor, and increasingly a gold mining revenue source. Nigeria is not losing territory to terrorists in the conventional sense. It is losing a federally managed national park, which is constitutionally and institutionally a more significant failure than losing ungoverned bush. Why Abuja is not treating this as a national emergency? The Borgu Kainji corridor has been deteriorating for over 3 years. The attacks are documented, the perpetrators are identified, the geographic base is known, and the pattern is consistent. Yet, no national emergency has been declared. No dedicated military operation has been launched specifically targeting the Kainji corridor. No federal government official has addressed the country specifically about this theater of conflict. The political explanation for this institutional paralysis has 3 components. First, Borgu is not electorally or economically significant enough to command federal political attention. It does not produce oil. It does not have a major urban center. Its communities are rural, marginal, and politically disconnected from the networks that drive Abuja's priority calculations. Second, declaring a national emergency in Niger State would require a political conversation about governance failure that the Tinubu administration is not prepared to have 18 months before an election. Security emergencies are electoral liabilities when the incumbent is the one declaring them. Third, the transnational dimension of the threat, JNIM fighters from the Sahel, routes through Benin Republic, logistics tied to the Liptako-Goma corridor, requires diplomatic and military coordination with Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger Republic, and Benin. Nigeria's current relationship with the Sahel military governments, which ousted pro-Western civilian governments in coups, is at its most diplomatically complex in decades. Abuja lacks the bilateral frameworks to address the cross-border security architecture. The territorial control signal. The ransom letter to Papiri community is analytically the most significant development in this entire episode. Ransom demands sent to communities before attacks are not banditry tactics, they are governance replacement tactics. They signal that the armed group has decided it will extract revenue from the territory either through payment or through the demonstration of force that compels future payment. This is how jihadist groups establish permanent territorial control. It is the pattern that preceded the emergence of a proto-state in parts of the northeast, and it is now appearing in the north-central. Who is paying the price? The communities of Borgu Emirate, Luma, Babana, Agwara, Papiri, Wawa are paying with their lives, their livelihoods, their children's education, and their mobility. The Babana border market, the primary economic activity for thousands of traders across the area, was shut down on the one day it operates every week because the bridge connecting it was destroyed. A community's entire weekly commerce eliminated by a single IED. The economic cost of this security failure is not captured in any federal budget line or national economic indicator, but it is real and it is accumulating. 2027 electoral implications. Niger State is not a battleground state in conventional 2027 electoral analysis, but the security deterioration in Borgu and the broader North Central has political implications that extend beyond Niger State. Peter Obi has publicly cited figures of over 1,000 Nigerians killed in the first 2 months of 2026 alone. The Borgu attacks add to that documentation. Every attack that is not prevented, every community that is not protected, and every governor visit that produces condolences but no security plan is evidence that reinforces the opposition's central argument that the Tinubu administration has not solved Nigeria's security crisis and cannot be trusted to do so. The same night the Loma Road bridge was bombed in Niger State, a suspected bomb explosion also rocked Woro community in Borgu LGA of Kwara State, reportedly claiming several lives. 2 states, 1 night. Coordinated or coincidental, the security apparatus has not explained which. What it confirms is that the Borgu Kainji corridor is not a Niger State problem. It is a regional security crisis that has already crossed the state boundary into Kwara. Security analysts warned in January 2026 that violence could spill into Kwara's Kayama and Baruten LGAs. That warning has now been validated on the same date as the Niger State bridge bombing. The corridor is widening. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. The geographic shift of jihadist violence. For 15 years, Nigeria's jihadist crisis was framed as a northeast problem, Borno, Yobe, Adamawa. The Tinubu administration, like its predecessors, has managed the political narrative of insecurity by containing it geographically in public communication. The Borgu Kainji corridor attacks shatter that containment. The jihadist front is not moving toward the northeast, it is moving toward the center. And the center of Nigeria is where the roads, rivers, and logistics corridors connect every region to every other region. Infrastructure as a target. The deliberate bombing of a bridge is a doctrinal escalation. Previous attacks in Borgu targeted communities, markets, schools, and farms, all of which are horrific but recoverable. Bridges are different. A destroyed bridge severs connectivity between communities, between security forces and their operational areas, between traders and markets, between patients and hospitals. The IED doctrine being applied in Borgu is the same doctrine used by ISWAP in the northeast to create ungoverned spaces. Its appearance in the north central is not an accident, it is an operational expansion. The Kainji Dam dimension. This is the dimension of this story that is almost entirely absent from mainstream Nigerian security commentary. The Kainji Dam, Nigeria's largest hydroelectric facility, providing a significant portion of the national grid power generation capacity, sits on the Niger River approximately 160 kilometers from the Borgu attack site. The Borgu National Park surrounds and extends toward the dam's catchment area. A jihadist group capable of bombing infrastructure bridges in Borgu is operating in the geographic vicinity of one of Nigeria's most critical pieces of national infrastructure. That proximity is currently not assessed as a direct threat, but the directional logic of the group's expansion makes it a future risk that no Nigerian security planner should be ignoring. Economic consequences. The Babana border market is a trans-border commercial hub connecting Nigeria, Benin Republic, and informal trade networks across the sub-region. Its disruption has immediate economic costs for thousands of traders and their families. The broader economic costs of sustained insecurity in the Borgu axis, reduced agricultural activity, population displacement, suppressed investment, and the cost of security deployments falls on the communities that can least afford it and on a state government whose fiscal capacity is already strained. Does this strengthen or weaken Nigerian democracy? A government that cannot protect its citizens on a Monday morning market route has no democratic mandate worth defending. Nigeria's democratic institutions derive their legitimacy from the social contract, the obligation of government to provide security in exchange for the consent of the governed. In Borgu, that contract has been broken repeatedly with no visible consequence for those holding executive power. The erosion of state authority in the North Central is not simply a security failure, it is a democratic failure, one that will shape how communities in affected areas relate to elections, to government institutions, and to the idea of Nigeria itself. The Sahel connection, the threat nobody wants to name. JNIM, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, is an Al-Qaeda-affiliated umbrella organization that controls significant territory in Mali and Burkina Faso. Its fighters are now documented as operating inside Nigerian territory through the Liptako-Goma corridor. This This is not speculation. It is the finding of Zagazola Makama, a security analyst whose assessments are referenced by Nigerian and international counterterrorism practitioners, and it is consistent with intelligence reviewed by Truth Nigeria's investigative team. Nigeria is facing an externally sourced jihadist insurgency in its north-central zone, rooted through countries whose governments are now hostile to Western and Nigerian counterterrorism cooperation. The ECOWAS and regional security dimension. The military governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic have all withdrawn from ECOWAS, forming the Alliance of Sahel States. Nigeria's counterterrorism cooperation with those states, which was already limited, has collapsed. The forest corridors through which JNIM and affiliated groups move from the Sahel into Nigeria run through Benin Republic, which remains an ECOWAS member, but has its own significant security vulnerabilities. Nigeria's ability to address the transnational logistics of the Borgu threat requires bilateral security engagement with states that are either hostile, fragile, or disconnected from the multilateral frameworks that Nigeria operates within. The French military support offer. In a recent diplomatic engagement, French President Macron offered military equipment support to Nigeria in a meeting with President Tinubu. France has been expelled from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic by their military governments. Its strategic interest in Nigerian security engagement is partly driven by its need for a southern anchor for Sahel counterterrorism operations after its northern positions were lost. Nigeria must navigate this offer carefully. The equipment and intelligence support has genuine operational value, but the political optics of a French military partnership in the current Sahel context require sophisticated management. The diaspora perspective. For Nigerians in the United Kingdom and the United States, many of whom have family connections to Niger State and the North Central, the Borgu attacks are not an abstraction. They are the security environment that makes return difficult, investment risky, and optimism about Nigeria's trajectory hard to sustain. The diaspora's emotional and financial ties to the home country are eroded every time a bridge is bombed, a market is shut down, or a community is told to relocate without support. The cumulative security narrative is one of the most powerful arguments that diaspora skeptics of Nigerian investment make, and it is getting harder to counter. The government's position, presented fairly. The Nigerian security establishment and the Tinubu administration would make the following arguments, and they deserve fair presentation. Counterinsurgency in forested terrain against non-uniformed combatants with IED capability is one of the most difficult military challenges any state can face. The Nigerian army is simultaneously managing active theaters in the northeast, northwest, and now north central, with a force structure and budget that has not kept pace with the expansion of the threat. The clearance operations announced after the bridge bombing are real, and they have produced results in previous engagements, including documented eliminations of terrorist commanders. The government is not doing nothing, it is doing insufficient things against an expanding threat. Misconceptions in circulation. 1. This is banditry, not jihadist terrorism. This framing, which appears in some official statements, is analytically insufficient. The Klingendel Institute, Zagazola Makama, Truth Nigeria, and multiple independent security analysts have documented ideological jihadist elements in the Borgu Kainji corridor. The ransom letter, the school abductions, the church burning, and now the infrastructure bombing are consistent with jihadist operational patterns, not opportunistic criminal banditry. Calling it banditry suppresses the ideological dimension and leads to security responses calibrated for the wrong threat. 2. The military is on top of the situation. The police spokesperson's statement after the bridge bombing said, clearance operations were being intensified. The same statement, in almost identical language, was issued after the Kasuwan Daiji massacre in January 2026 that killed 30 people, after the Papiri school abduction in November 2025, and after multiple previous attacks. Intensified operations that do not prevent the next attack within weeks are not adequate responses. They are repetitive crisis management without strategic resolution. 3. This is a Niger State problem for Governor Bago to solve. The transnational nature of the threat, JNIM fighters from Mali and Burkina Faso, routing through Benin Republic, operating inside a federal national park, means this cannot be a state-level security problem. The Kainji National Park is federally managed. The cross-border threat requires federal diplomatic and military authority. Governor Bago's visits and directives are inadequate responses to a threat that requires presidential-level strategic engagement. Attacks around Kainji Lake surged from 5 recorded in 2022 to 29 in 2023, a near 6-fold increase in a single year. That trend line has continued into 2024 and 2025. The trajectory is not ambiguous. It is a documented escalation curve. Nigeria has had 3 years of clear data showing that the Kainji corridor was becoming a jihadist sanctuary. 3 years of warning. The bridge that was bombed on March 23, 2026 was not a surprise. It was a prediction fulfilled. And the question that demands an answer is, what were the 3 years of intelligence, security planning, and executive decision-making producing, if not the prevention of an outcome that every analyst could see coming? Most likely next moves. The jihadist groups will continue to use the Kainji corridor as a base, conducting hit-and-run attacks, extracting ransom from communities, targeting infrastructure to slow security responses, and gradually expanding their territorial perimeter. The destruction of the Luma Road Bridge achieves their immediate operational objective, impeding troop movement while simultaneously punishing the communities for not paying the 150 million naira ransom demand. Expect further IED deployment and at least one significant community attack within the next 4 to 6 weeks. The Nigerian military will conduct clearance operations in the immediate aftermath of this attack, likely producing some tactical successes, including possible elimination of forward-positioned fighters. These operations will be announced. They will not produce strategic resolution. The forest sanctuary will remain intact because clearing a 5,000 square kilometer national park requires a sustained, dedicated force commitment that has not been authorized or resourced. The federal government will issue condolences, will visit the state or send a representative, will announce increased security deployments, will not declare a state of emergency or produce a publicly stated strategic plan for the Borgu Kainji corridor specifically. The political incentive structure does not reward public acknowledgement of the severity of the crisis. It rewards the appearance of action without the accountability of stated objectives. Niger State government. Governor Bago will face escalating pressure from community leaders, traditional institutions, and civil society. His previous directive to communities to relocate without support infrastructure will be revisited and challenged. The Borgu Emirate, whose communities have borne the greatest cost of this crisis, will intensify demands for a federal military base, not police patrols, in the Borgu axis. Signals to watch. Whether any federal government statement specifically addresses the Borgu Kainji Jihadist corridor by name, whether a dedicated military operation beyond the existing Operation Hadarin Daji is announced for the Kainji corridor, whether Nigeria opens any bilateral security dialogue with Benin Republic to address the cross-border infiltration route, whether the National Park Service makes any public statement about the security situation within Kainji Lake National Park, and whether any 2027 presidential candidate produces a specific security policy addressing the north-central jihadist expansion. The warning that the Borgu Kainji corridor could become a permanent jihadist sanctuary linking Sahel networks to Nigeria's heartland was issued in January 2026 by Zagazola Makama, one of Nigeria's most credible independent security analysts. The March 23 bridge bombing in the same corridor by the same groups using the same forest hideout validates that warning. The corridor has not been cleared, the sanctuary is consolidating, and the directional logic of the group's expansion, documented in attacks from Borgu through Agwara toward Kwara State, confirms that the threat is not contained, it is spreading. Governor Bago's directive to communities near Kainji National Park to relocate within 2 months with no housing, no relocation support, and no timeline for when they could return was not a security strategy. It was an admission that the government cannot protect them where they are. Residents were angered by this directive and interpreted it as abandonment. The communities that did not relocate were attacked again. The ones that did relocate lost their farms, their livelihoods, and their roots. Either outcome is a governance failure. The choice between displacement and death is not a security policy. It is a humanitarian crisis that the federal government has allowed to develop and has not resolved. Best case scenario: the federal government designates the Borgu Kainji corridor a priority security theater. A dedicated military operation is launched with the force structure and mandate to clear the Kainji National Park. Bilateral security engagement with Benin Republic closes the infiltration corridor. Nigeria engages the Sahel states through ECOWAS proxies on intelligence sharing. The IED threat is degraded. Communities are able to return to their farms and markets. The jihadist expansion into the north central is arrested before it reaches Kwara. Worst case scenario: no strategic response follows the bridge bombing. The corridor continues to consolidate as a jihadist sanctuary. Attacks spread into Kwara State, validated by the same night Kayama LGA bombing. Community displacement accelerates. The Babana market economy collapses. The jihadist groups achieve territorial extortion control, extracting revenue from communities that have no state protection. And the Borgu Kainji corridor becomes the north-central equivalent of the Sambisa forest, a permanent armed non-state sanctuary inside Nigeria's borders, operating without effective government response for the foreseeable future. We began with a bridge. A bridge on Nuku-Woro Road in Borgu LGA, Niger State. The only road to 3 communities. The route to the only market. Destroyed at 2 o'clock on a Monday morning by people who knew exactly what they were doing and who told the communities they were coming 48 hours in advance and were not stopped. That bridge is not just concrete and steel. It is the connectivity that makes a community function. It is the route to the market that feeds families. It is the road that security forces need to move. And its destruction is a message sent deliberately, executed on schedule, and received in full by the people of Borgu, who have now been receiving these messages for 3 years without an adequate reply from the Nigerian state. The most dangerous word in this story is not jihadist. It is not IED. It is not even 8 dead. The most dangerous word in this story is again. Because this has happened before, in Kaswandaji in January 2026, in Papiri in November 2025, in Damala in January 2026, across 29 documented attacks in 2023 alone. The pattern is established. The perpetrators are identified. The geography is mapped. The warning was issued. The bridge was bombed anyway. Nigeria does not have a terrorism problem that it cannot solve. Nigeria has a political will problem that it has chosen not to solve. And until the cost of inaction becomes greater than the political cost of decisive response, the bridges will keep falling. The bombing of the Nuku-Woro Road bridge is not a security incident. It is a sovereignty failure. A state that cannot protect a bridge connecting 3 communities in its own territory has ceded that territory, in practice if not in law. Nigeria must decide whether it is willing to reclaim it. You now know something that most Nigerians watching the news tonight do not know. What you do with it is up to you. Share it, debate it, challenge it. That is how democracies survive.